If you have already watched the video on e-receipts, you'll find that much of the next couple of minutes are the same, and that's because the setup process is the same. I apologize for repeating here if you've already heard it, but it's here for those who are starting with this video about ePledge statements. ePledge statements are part of a set of emailed statements that Denari calls e-correspondence. E-correspondence is considered an add-on module, and there is a charge for emails. You can discuss the fee with our admin office. It requires that a credit card is on file in Denari, and the fees will be charged on a monthly basis. You can set up the credit card that you'll be using by clicking on the Self-Service tab in Denari just off the screen here, and then click on Credit Card on File. Click the Add Edit button to add your card, and then click Save. Fill in the billing contact information below, and you're ready to go. You may already have a card on file, and if so, you won't need to do anything further here. The next step in the process is to set up an ePledge statement template. It is a separate template from your printed pledge statement template, although it can look similar. Synergy staff will work with you to set up your template. It is important to remember that the ePledge statement is not an emailed statement that the donor will receive in their email and may or may not print out. It is not a printed statement that will be emailed as an attachment. Since the donor is responsible to print out the email, the look of the statement will depend on their ability to print from their email program. Therefore, it is a good idea to keep the layout simple. The goal is to provide them with a tax statement and a thank you message. It will probably never look as good as your printed statement when and if it is printed. Denari determines which donors will get printed or emailed statements based on that donor's preference, and that can be selected by you internally, or the donor can make that selection through their online community account. So the next step is to set up the preferences for each donor, but first you must decide what your philosophy will be toward pledge statements. One option is to decide that all donors with an email address will get ePledge statements whether they state that as their preference or not. Or you could decide that all donors will get printed statements unless they tell you differently. We can set the global setting for either of those policies when setting up your template, and it can be changed later if needed. If no preference is set for a donor, Denari will default to the global setting. Let's assume now that all of your donors will get printed statements unless they tell you they want the emailed version. Once you know their preference, you're ready to set them up, and it's fairly simple. We'll go to the Donors tab, Name List Management, and select the donor's name. From there, we go to the Other Pages drop-down field and choose e-correspondence emails. If they don't already have an email address here, we'll click on Add New to create a new one, but I'll just click on the one that's already here. You'll fill in the email address and choose a status. New here simply means that this email address has never been used by Denari to send an email. Once that happens, it will change automatically to active. The last thing you need to do here is hit the Make Primary button at the top of the page, and the button doesn't appear here because this email address is already the primary address. That will cause the email address to be the one that Denari uses for e-statements. And now click Save. Now we can set the preference by clicking the power bar icon to the right and selecting e-correspondence preferences. Select the email address that you want to use for ePledge statements, and then select the delivery method. Again, hit Save, and from now on Denari will not produce a printed statement when you run pledge statements for this donor. Just like printed pledge statements, you can choose to send statements to only a select group of people using a pledge segment. For example, you may decide to only send them to those who are behind in their pledges, or you could only send them to those who are more than 90 days behind, etc. All of the filters of the pledge segment are available to you. For more information about Pledge Segmenter, you can view that series of videos found on the video menu page. To run ePledge statements, go to the eCorrespondence tab, and in the Admin section, select ePledge statements. First, select the letter body that you have previously created. The statement template can have a place for the salutation and letter at the top with the pledge information at the bottom. You will create the letter body that you want for your ePledge statements under the Gifts tab and then Letters, and select it here. So let's go there now. You'll click Add New to create a new letter. Notice here that there are two fields. The large field at the top says Body of Letter is a text box. Anything you put here is going to show up on the statement as just text. You can't underline or bold or add pictures, etc. here. Below you have an HTML editor link. Click that to enter your letter body there. It will allow you to bold, underline, add photos, etc., and those will show up in your ePledge statements. For more information about the HTML editor, you will find videos on the video menu page also. Now, back to running ePledge statements. You'll select your letter and then enter a calculation date. Usually that's today's date. However, there could be fields on your template that calculate the values as of this date, but usually that's not the case. Today's date most of the time will work well. If you want to filter the statements to limit who will be sending them to, as I mentioned earlier, you can select your pledge segment here. You will, of course, already have created that. If you leave this field blank, Denari will produce ePledge statements for all open pledges in your data. The name segment to exclude field allows you to remove some donors from the process. For example, you might not want to send statements to people who are on your board. You could create a classification called Board and assign that to each of your board members. Then create a name segment using that classification in Classes In and select it here. When you run the e-statements, Denari will first run the name segment and find those name records with that classification and remove them from the output here. Of course, you could use any of the filters in Name Segmenter to remove names from the statement process. Again, for more information on Name Segmenter, you'll find a series of videos on the video menu page. Once the form is filled out, click the Submit Request button at the top of the page. At this point, Denari does not begin sending emails. It only creates the job that will be waiting for approval. The reason for the approval process is to give you a chance to review the statements before they are sent. To approve them, you'll go to the eCorrespondence tab, and at the bottom of the page, you'll find the jobs that are waiting for approval. Under the View column, you see the View Job link, and that just gives you an opportunity to open the job and review the statements, as we mentioned earlier. Once you're satisfied that the job is ready to go, you can click anywhere in that row to open the approval form. These are, of course, a receipts job, but it works the same. Simply enter the approval code and click Approve Job. The emails are now being sent and there's no going back. They can't be retrieved at this point. So where do you get the approval code? We'll go to the eCorrespondence tab and then eCorrespondence Control Record. In the Authorization Information section here, we see the link to change the authorization code. Click that, enter the new code or password, and click the Change Password button. Sometimes there's a problem with an email address and those emails may bounce. When that happens, you will usually get an email telling you that your email to a specific person has been returned or bounced, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. So how do you know when an email has bounced and who are the donors? Let's click on the eCorrespondence tab and then Smart Email Dashboard. You can also get to the same page by clicking the Email button at the top of Denari just off the screen here. Here you see lists of jobs that are awaiting approval in the upper left-hand box. You can run them here just as you did from the e-correspondence page. It does the same thing. Below that you find the recent jobs box. This will list jobs that have been recently sent, and I've got a better example for you here. Notice the columns sent on, sent, bounces, and resend bounces. When there's a job listed here, you'll find a number in that field that shows how many bounces there were for that job. Click on the link to that job then to see a report showing other information about the job. And you'll get a report that looks similar to this. Click on the number in the bounce field and Denari will run another report showing the donors whose statements have bounced. And there's actually more information that can't fit on this screen here that extends out to the right. That'll give you a phone number and email, etc. You can now take steps to correct the problem or change their preference to printed only so that they continue to get statements. Of course, you can click on the numbers in the other fields for information related to those fields as well. Back in the Smart Email dashboard, you also have a send link that appears when there are bounces. Clicking that will resend that statement. Of course, depending on the original problem that caused it to bounce, it may bounce again. This concludes this video on pledge statements. If you have any questions, please contact tech support through the support button at the top of the Denari page.